Hello, and welcome to Coffee Time with Abcadeus. I'm your host, Abcadeus, and this is the show where you might just see me take a sip of this coffee, but more or less, I just rant about anything and everything that interests me. Today, we do return to a political topic. The Chinese balloon saga is not over like I thought it was. It is still ongoing. There are a couple updates in regards to that I think are pretty important. We have an article from Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Seymour Hersh in regards to the destruction of the Nordstream pipelines. And then I do want to dive a bit into what I see as warring factions inside the US state itself. And lastly, I will round out the video by more or less just making one or two comments on the Rage Against the War Machine rally, in particular in regards to a tweet from author Caitlin Johnstone. So first off, with the Chinese balloon saga, so the first thing that happened in the sequence of events, starting from after my previous videos, the point we were at in my previous videos where the Americans had shot the balloon down, I was under the incorrect understanding that they had actually shot it down in waters that were too deep for them to retrieve the balloon out of, but it does appear that they were able to retrieve the balloon, at least that is what they say, and they have found, allegedly, multiple antennas, most likely capable of collecting communications data. They claim that the US claims that they were able to identify these antennas before they shot it down. President Biden was aware of the presence of these antennas before he gave the authorization to shoot it down. And I guess what I really just want to say about this is I definitely don't trust anything coming out of the US State Department. I mean, they could tell me the sky is blue and I would still have to go outside just to double check. But it does seem likely that at least this balloon was capable of carrying out espionage missions, whether or not that was the actual intention or if this balloon was actually intended for the US is a bit more questionable in my mind. Of course, the presence of these antennas is just a matter of trust, really, how much you trust the US State Department and the claims they are making. Obviously, the official line from the CPC, the Communist Party of China, is going to be that they were not using this balloon for espionage. China has actually been reacting pretty volatilely, I guess. I don't know how to conjugate that word, but they haven't been reacting well to the to the balloon being shot down. They refused to take a call. I believe it was from the U.S. foreign minister, I want to say. Okay, just declined a call from the US. It doesn't say. I'm sure you could find out who specifically they declined to take the call from. But yeah, basically the Chinese are not happy with the balloon being shot down. The US is consistently asserting that it was absolutely for espionage purposes. So I think this is more of an indication that the tensions between the US and China are only set to increase from here. We are absolutely on a path to war with China. It may or may not be over the Taiwan Strait, although that is most likely where the war will take place. Yeah, it's definitely everything I'm seeing from Western media and even the Western public, like general public opinion, it really is gearing towards the direction of war with China. Like, I don't really think anybody understands the implications of that outside of the US Defense Department and those of us who pay attention to geopolitics and take an honest view at countries that are not our own. But for a lot of people, I think they're under the impression that the US could roll in and take out China in a week. So you see a lot of people, at least when I say people in this context, I mean the public, just regular people, not people with military backgrounds or any understanding or education on China or its history. But I think a lot of people are under the assumption that the reason they don't have healthcare is because they could wipe any other country off the face of the planet in a matter of minutes. I'm exaggerating a bit there, but you kind of get the sentiment that I've been seeing. The further development of this is there is now another object that has been shot down once again. To my knowledge, at the time of recording, the country of origin hasn't been confirmed. The one thing the U.S. was saying that it wasn't a balloon. It was something significantly smaller in size, but it definitely seems. Again, I'll say I should mention this object was shot down with the same F-22 fighter jet, the same AIM-9X missile, so very similar to how the Chinese balloon was shot down. And I think this is an indication of how ready at least the Biden administration is to prove that it's not afraid of anything, that it's willing to protect American sovereignty or whatever kind of line they want to take on it. They just want to prove to the world that, they're not going to back down from China. And you see, you kind of see that reflected in Biden's ridiculous comments in his State of the Union, asking, who would want to be Xi Jinping right now? I'm sure a lot of people would. A lot of people that are in control of less powerful countries, I'm sure, would love to be in Xi's position, as well as a lot of communists, I'm sure, would love to be in Xi's position. But that's aside from the point right now. It seems like this wasn't the first time that this kind of incident has actually happened, that a high-altitude craft has passed over U.S. airspace. But with that being said, it seems like when it had done so in the past, the U.S. Department of Defense wasn't really aware of it. I believe it would be, it is the Air Force that is responsible for it. But they said at the time they weren't able to actually verify or track these balloons. They weren't aware of the previous encroachments from high-altitude equipment like this. So they're kind of asserting the line that, we figured it out after through intelligence analysis, whatever that means. That could be anything from we talked to a couple people that saw it to we have satellite imagery of these items over the U.S. It could really mean anything. Again, it's hard to trust anything anybody out of the U.S. State Department says, and that's exactly why. With the next topic, the story from Seymour Hersh, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, broke the story on the My Lai massacre back in 1968. It was an incident in South Vietnam, obviously during the Vietnam War, where U.S. soldiers murdered 300 to 500 South Vietnamese citizens. Just mowed them down in cold blood. He also reported on Watergate and Abu Ghraib, probably pronouncing that wrong, Abu Ghraib, the prisoner detention and torture facility I'm sure a lot of you know about. But Seymour is kind of on the button, on the cutting edge of things when it comes to breaking conspiratorial news stories. His reports have been verified several times before, but now he's come out with a report, a fairly detailed report on what happened with the Nordstream Pipeline. And there has been a lot of analysis, a lot of talk about this, so I don't feel the need to go in too specifically on this. If you want a more expansive analysis, watch the Duran video, watch the couple videos from Brian Berletic. The main point, though, to take home from this is it's more or less 4 individuals that can be held responsible for this. Victoria Nuland and Joe Biden being 2 of them. There are denials coming out of the White House, but it is not from any of the officials actually implicated. It's denials coming from their spokespeople, so that would kind of imply a mask of legal ambiguity, so that if they were actually involved in this and it can be proven and they can be implicated, they won't compound that issue by also lying on the record about it. But there are a lot of pretty specific details that, for example, like they used divers out of a training facility that kind of it is a U.S. Navy facility, but it functions in some ways outside of the confines of the U.S. Navy. People can be hired privately through it, so that was kind of the way the Biden administration navigated their way around consulting Congress on this issue. It does look like the planning started in December 2021, so actually before Russia's invasion. But I think this really shows the idea that, at least the Biden administration in particular, is absolutely on a war path. They're just looking to piss off anybody and everybody. This pipeline that mainly benefited one of their major allies in Europe, Germany, this pipeline wasn't even safe because it was contrary to U.S. foreign interests. The President of the United States justified destroying it, which is also something, if you watch Biden's State of the Union address, it's super strange to see him kind of just dawdle along and read out this script and then get to the point where he's talking about Xi Jinping and then just light up and get invigorated. Like, it seems like he's an old man on the cusp or experiencing things like Alzheimer's and dementia, but he just has those slight moments where he gets his energy back and he's just this little spitfire. It's really interesting. With that being said, I don't know, say, if Trump was in his position or Obama was in his position, that things would really be any different. But with that being said, I know, at least on paper, Obama was a little more hands-off with intelligence agencies. He passed that responsibility to his vice president, which was Joe Biden at the time. And Joe Biden is a little more directly involved in the intelligence agency's operation, as well as their intelligence gathering. If you look at any video, any program with Larry Johnson on any platform, he's a former CIA analyst, but he really speaks to this kind of flip that happened around 2005, where the operational and the analytical divisions of the CIA were combined into one. And in effect, it created this environment where intelligence analysis is based off of foreign policy instead of foreign policy being based on the intelligence analysis. So instead of figuring out what's going on and then making decisions based on that, they make decisions and then they figure out what's going on, but only in the context that can support their foreign policy position. So if they say country A is doing X, Y, and Z, and we need to invade them, it is then the onus of the intelligence agencies to prove that country is doing X, Y, and Z, instead of the intelligence agencies coming to the State Department and saying, hey, this country is doing X, Y, and Z. What should we do about it? It's quite often the opposite process now, especially with the big players that are kind of positioning themselves as an alternative to American hegemony, like China, Russia. It's a really common trope with those countries in particular. But yeah, definitely the Seymour Hersh article is absolutely great. It is a fantastic read. There is a lot to learn from it. Of course, this is just a journalist giving his opinion. It has been officially denied by the White House, so we should be a little careful with taking it as absolute truth. But from my analysis and my recollection of the events from watching and paying attention to this conflict as a whole, but specifically the Nordstream Pipeline incident, it seems like this is the most likely explanation. It makes no sense for Russia to blow up their own infrastructure that they could have just turned off anyways if they wanted to really economically affect Germany by cutting it off from their natural gas supplies. They didn't have to blow the thing up. They could have just turned off the taps. So that explanation makes no sense unless you're under the assumption that Putin is just an absolutely deranged madman that is trying to take over the world and will not let anything stop him. I'm not trying to make a pro-Putin argument, but I think that's just a very non-dialectical, non-analytical approach to geopolitics to assert that even the U.S. empire is just unreasonably evil and power hungry. I would still argue that mainly the U.S. State Department is evil and power hungry, but they do have some underlying motives that may be good-natured on the surface. How should I say? There's no, in my opinion, no situation in geopolitics outside of the Second World War and the particular ideology and party that was very popular and prominent in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. Aside from that, I don't think there's anything quite black and white throughout history. There's always several nuances, always several things to consider, and we do ourselves a great disservice when we try to understand the world in a lens of good versus evil, or in the context of specifically the World War II, the powers at the time that World War II took place. Basically, a world leader is FDR, Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, or Adolf Hitler. There's no alternatives. Every world leader has to fit in one of those categories, or nothing makes sense to anybody. Is more indicative, I think, of the U.S. education system and the corporate duopoly that we find in America and Canada, for that matter, where you get these different parties, but at the end of the day, they're all funded by and interested in the elite class, the rich people, the upper class. All these parties, all these politicians make their living off of appeasing the rich and powerful. So they have to do whatever they can to keep those people happy. But with that being said, sometimes not all of the rich people actually agree. So you do get some, how shall I say, contradicting narratives that come from this sometimes. Like, for example, you see all the stuff happening with classified documents. So you see, after Trump's classified document ordeal kind of came to light, it was maybe a year later that Biden is also found to have a bunch of classified documents, and then Mike Pence, Trump's vice president, is found to have some classified documents as well. It definitely doesn't seem coincidental that all these things happened one right after the other. I would generally think, I know for a fact that a president can't be criminally prosecuted while he's in office. That's why the impeachment process exists, I believe, so they can remove him from office and then pursue criminal charges. But it really does seem like there's some faction of the U.S. state that is pushing back against the push against Trump, in a way. Like, I know the GOP itself, the Republican Party itself, isn't necessarily pro-Trump. There are quite a few pro-Trump Republicans, but there's also quite a few anti-Trump Republicans. But I would think that in this situation, if the U.S. State Department was unified and they found these documents in Biden's possession, they initially did put off announcing that. They found out about that in November, right around the midterm elections, and didn't announce anything about it until January in terms of Biden's classified documents. So I don't think that was coincidental either. But you would think that if the State Department was a little more unified, that they would do a bit more to cover up Biden's transgressions, how shall we say. May not have been a crime. I'm actually going to link a Legal Eagle video down below. I think is a necessary watch for anybody that really wants to get into the nitty-gritty of these classified documents. But for a number of reasons and factors, it looks like Biden most likely isn't going to face any criminal charges. He may face some kind of impeachment hearing or some reaction from Congress, but in terms of the law, at least how I understand it, there's no real valid criminal charges to be laid against Biden, mainly because he cooperated the whole time. I'm sure that will only help unite America, tearing apart the two factions in America that are completely, pro-Trump, pro-Biden. That was sarcasm, by the way. I think this will definitely, the conclusion of this, will see Biden not get criminally charged. Trump seems like he most likely will get criminally charged, and Biden may get removed out of office, or may more or less be asked not to run in 2024. But at the end of the day, the way the general public is going to see it is that Biden got special treatment. And I'm no supporter of either Biden or Trump. I don't support liberal politicians. Yes, Trump supports liberalism. He supports the current monetary order, the current economic system, which is considered liberalism. It is capitalism, but neoliberalism is really the evolution of it. Started under Reagan, a Republican president. But aside from that, I don't support either of them. But I think this will echo into the general public. It'll kind of intensify the feelings of division that are already in America. But I also think it's indicative of those rich people themselves having some kinds of disagreements, where some of them seem to be all gung-ho. They are pro-Ukraine, pro-Biden, pro-military industrial complex. And then, at least in terms of some of the Republicans and maybe a couple independents, they seem to be going against that rhetoric and against that narrative, but they do seem to be few and far in between. They're definitely not enough of a force to significantly change U.S. foreign policy on the matter, but it does seem like there is some opposition somewhere in the United States to the Ukraine war, and just Biden's policies and neoliberalism in general. I would again assert that things wouldn't really be that different under Trump. The only thing I really think, at least in our current geopolitical makeup, the only thing that would really be different under Trump is there might actually be U.S. boots on the ground in Ukraine at this point. But again, hard to say. That's all speculation. At the end of the day, inflation is still there. Massive corporate price hikes and money grabs still exist. Housing prices are still exploding. Wages are still stagnant. People are doing worse than ever, and that is not going to change no matter who gets elected into the halls of Congress. At least, not in my opinion anyways. But I think this will be an interesting thing to kind of keep an eye on, to watch as time goes forward, to see if we can see any more indications of this crack in the elite class of America. Because I would really hope that they continue to divide amongst themselves and create more problems for themselves like this. This is the same thing they do with the working class. They give us these very minuscule, blown out of proportion kind of specific issues like trans people in bathrooms, and they want us to focus on that so we don't pay attention to the absolutely failing economy, the rapidly declining quality of life in the West as a whole. No, don't pay attention to any of that. Pay attention to the issue of the week, Leonardo DiCaprio's young girlfriend, or the Harry Potter game. These are more important conversations to have than should we make a deal with the Russians before we're living through nuclear winter? No. That's irrelevant. No one wants to talk about that. Who cares about nuclear war? The end of the human life as we know it? What I'm really concerned about is that man dressed as a woman being in that bathroom. That's the main issue to me. Like, not to say that those particular issues don't have any effect or that they don't matter. And I'm always an advocate of, you can be mad about more than one thing at a time. You have a brain. You can compound these issues, and you can be mad at multiple things at multiple times. But almost every single person I see talking about those kinds of issues do not care about the issues that could lead up to the extinction of the human race. It seems like if you're going to care about something, the one main thing to care about is the potential nuclear apocalypse. And that brings me to Caitlin Johnstone's tweet, which I'm just going to read out loud because this is a sentiment I share and something that I've kind of been saying myself for the past couple of days as I've seen the discussion around the Rage Against the War Machine anti-war rally happening in Washington, D.C. on February 19th. February 19th. Cool. I know what I'm talking about. But anyways, this tweet from Caitlin Johnstone reads, "Leftists should never attend a large anti-war rally that isn't populated exclusively by leftists. Instead, they should wait until there's a large anti-war rally that only leftists are speaking at, and keep on waiting, and just keep on waiting until we all die in a nuclear holocaust." And this is why, when I talked about the Rage Against the War Machine rally, I started off by saying I absolutely commend these individuals. I think it's a great thing that they're doing. And then I went through every speaker that I'm aware of and basically explained that I disagree with most of their opinions, thoughts, and beliefs. But at the end of the day, nuclear holocaust is a much more pressing issue than any kind of social issue or any kind of particular economic issue even. At the end of the day, if there's a nuclear holocaust, there is no debate of this system versus that system or this policy versus that policy. The only debate is how many people can we fit in this bunker? And the hint there, it won't be any poor people. It's going to be only rich people going into those bunkers. And by rich, I mean billionaire, millionaire. I'm not talking your dad who makes $250,000 as a doctor. No, I don't mean that as a rich person. I'm talking the people that have enough money to influence U.S. politics and buy a super advanced underground nuclear bunker. That's the kind of people we're talking about. And regardless of who's voicing the message, the idea that we need to start to fight against this endless war machine that is the military-industrial complex, I think should be a pretty universally acceptable idea. But apparently, it all depends on who that idea is coming from, right? As Caitlin Johnstone is saying, basically insinuating and talking about the rhetoric that's been around this, where people look at the speaker list and they're like, oh, Ron Paul's there, or Jackson Hinkle, or blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to do anything. I want an anti-war rally that's only organized with people that exactly politically align with me. I think that's absolutely asinine. I have my own political beliefs, I'm sure, as you can tell by this sweater. But I think at the end of the day, it's more important to focus on resolving specific issues instead of saying A, B, and C system would be way better than ours. I think personally it's better to ask a question like, well, you guys do all the work here, right? So why is it that 80% of the value you produce ends up going to shareholders and CEOs and CFOs and people that sit in offices all day jacking off to business cards? How is it that you are essential to the function of this business, that if you and your fellow workers didn't show up to work tomorrow, the business would literally have nothing? It has no way to create or sell products or services. How is that the truth? And then at the same time, almost all the profits go directly to somebody that either signed a contract at the right time or was already rich and had enough money to invest in this, or was the son or daughter of somebody that was super important and they got put in that position. I don't understand people's reasoning when they try to combat that narrative. I've never, at least in real life, on the internet, I have seen it sometimes, but in real life, when you have these kinds of conversations with people, and instead of being like, oh, this is the best ideology, or you need to read this book, just having these fundamental, kind of tangible arguments that more or less anybody could understand, I think is a lot more effective than pushing your ideology and pushing the history of your ideology. Because I think a lot of us could agree that war is bad, right? I would hope so. And I think a lot more could be accomplished by people gathering together around those particular issues, raising awareness, kind of changing the public narrative around those issues, than would be gained from just sitting in your own group of people and never going outside that and never talking to anybody that disagrees with you. Like, I try to make, if it's not clear, I'm a bit more on the left side, but I try to make a point to be involved in and following several right-leaning Facebook groups, Discords, all Reddits, all that kind of stuff, just to kind of gain an understanding of the way these people think and why they come to the conclusions they come to. But I feel like that's excessively rare, at least on the left. A lot of people on the left are so just dug in and entrenched, much like conservatives are, to be honest, but they're kind of entrenched in the idea of anything other than what I believe is morally reprehensible. And I do have a lot of opinions, and I do have like a lot of fundamental kind of rules when it comes to, if you believe this thing or you say this thing or you call people degenerates, I'm not going to tolerate that. I don't feel like it's even necessary to debate those kind of things. But I think for a lot of people, they want to stay in their little bubble. They don't want to go outside that. They don't want to see anything that could disagree with their preconceived notion. And maybe that's just something we have to deal with as humans. Maybe we have to find a way around that. Because I don't think any YouTube video, any public speaker, any kind of rally is going to dislodge people from their entrenched beliefs. I know for me, as I kind of made my political journey, some of the originally entrenched ideas and understanding of the world I had took a long time to get uprooted. And it was a steady process over years and years and years of consuming information, talking to people, and gradually getting dislodged from this place that I was kind of stuck in and moved to the place where I am. And I try to make a point, because of that, to play my own devil's advocate in a way, to argue both sides of a topic, of an issue, at least in my own brain, to try to see the logic of each one, how someone may have gotten to the conclusions that they may have gotten to, and perhaps find the truth, not always, but try to find the truth that sits somewhere in between as a happy medium. There's always three sides to a story: his, hers, and the truth, right? I'm gendering that, what is it called? I wanted to say an anecdote, but you know what I mean, whatever that's called. I'm kind of upset with myself. I don't know what that's called. Just like a saying, right? Like an everyday a saying, like to beat a dead horse, right? But you get the point that I'm making. I don't think a lot of people in the world want to find that nuanced opinion, and that's why I try to even counterbalance, even on the video where I was being absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion, about the Chinese balloon and took a Taobao screenshot and just ran with it. I balanced it with, it is possible. It's an espionage balloon. I try not to make any definitive statements that aren't founded in verifiable fact. And I think that's really important to do, but you can't expect the average person who generally just wants to live a nice life, you can't expect them to take that level of responsibility with it. So I don't know. there has to be a workaround for these kind of issues where people are just so entrenched by their particular team's colors. You know what I mean? I'm team blue, not team red. I will never agree with anything on team red. I will always agree with everything from team blue. And these are the same kind of people that were decrying fascism under Trump's presidency and who stopped showing up to any protests or any rallies on January 20th, 2020, because Biden was in office now. Or January 6th, sorry, I guess was the inauguration date. It's obviously an interesting day for a lot of reasons, but it seemed like after that, all the protests about fascism, about an overreaching police state, that all stopped. Biden didn't change any of those things. He didn't reverse course of anything that Trump or Obama or Bush did. But these people just stopped showing up in the streets because they thought the Mr. Team Red guy who says things I don't like is ruining the country, and Mr. Team Blue guy who says the things I do like is going to fix it. It's the reason the elites can continue to present this facade of democracy, this facade of choice. It is actually two different teams. They're not the same team. What are you talking about? They don't have the same interests. They don't generally pass the same laws or get involved in the same wars. Like, name me one time that either of those parties have been against any U.S. intervention. Like, and I mean a party as a whole. I may be a little ignorant on that, but to my knowledge, well, there were individual Congress people that were opposed to things like the Iraq War. Generally, any piece of U.S. foreign policy that involves military action is pretty unanimously consented to within the halls of American power. But I think that is enough of a rant from me today. We've almost gotten to 40 minutes. Thank you for watching this far. Thank you to the now 56 people I have subscribed to me. Again, I'm sure a lot of you guys just did that out of pity, but for the dozen or so plus people that continue to tune into my videos, I really appreciate it. I hope that the kind of constant switching between more techie gaming content and political content, I hope that doesn't bother you too much. I would just kind of hope that on the days, if you're not interested in tech, on the days that the tech video comes out, you just don't watch it, and vice versa. I'm sure a couple people are here because of some of my tech videos and are going to be shocked to hear some of my political rantings. I don't want to call them opinions per se, because a lot of it is just rantings. But anyways, again, thank you so much for watching. If you have any recommendations, anything you want to see in a future video, anything you want me to cover or research, please leave it as a comment down below. If you have any criticism for me or you want to contest anything I said, leave it as a comment, message me personally. I will either address it to you directly or bring it up in my next video. But other than that, again, thank you so much for watching, and you have a gooder.